Well, here I am, in the middle of a cornfield. If Harriet Tubman or John Brown was here, they'll be giving me my resignation letter or starting a rebellion. Harriet Tubman is a name that resonates as a symbol of courage, resistance, and liberation. Yet, her story is far more complex than the iconic image of Moses, leading enslaved people to freedom. Tubman's life defined sociality norms, challenged oppressive systems, and raised controversial questions about resilience and justice. For this project, I used the biography by Henry Walters, Harriet Tubman, A Life in American History, as it provides an in-depth explanation of her life over the years. In this presentation, we'll explore Tubman's backstory, the shortcomings that reveal her humanity, and how her legacy should be remembered in the 21st century. In many ways, Tubman's life serves as reputation for the larger struggles for racial and gender equality in America. How to reconcile her unyielding faith with readiness to use violence when necessary. How should we interpret her story in a modern context where debates about racism and historical memory continue to evolve? These are the questions that make Tubman not just a historical figure, but a controversial and deeply relevant icon. Alexa, let me tell you a bedtime story.
Tell me the one about Harriet Tubman's childhood.
That's what I was going to do anyways. Harriet Tubman, born with the real name Armida Minty Ross around 1822 in Maryland, endured a harsh and brutal childhood under slavery. Her parents, Harriet Green and Ben Ross, were enslaved from a young age. She was subjected to relentless labor and severe punishments. At 5, she was hired out as a domestic servant and was frequently whipped for minor mistakes. As she grew older, Tubman was forced into grueling field labor, developing strength but also suffering immense cruelty. A defining moment came when an overseer threw a metal weight at another enslaved person but struck Tubman in the head instead. The blow caused severe and vivid visions, which she believed were messages from God. Her family struggled, deeply affecting her. 3 of her sisters were sold away and were never to see again. Her fear to being separated from her loved ones was the horror she faced. Tubman's spirit remained unbroken. Her mother's acts to defiance inspired her, planting the seeds of courage that would one day transform her into a leader of the Underground Railroad and a symbol of freedom. This way, guys! Harriet Tubman's legendary status emerged from her daring missions as the conductor of the Underground Railroad. Over a decade, she orchestrated around 13 dangerous missions, rescuing approximately 70 enslaved people, including members of her own family. Her success was rooted in her exceptional strategic planning, courage, and deep knowledge of the terrain. Tubman used a network of safe houses, secret codes, and trusted allies. She disguised her passengers, traveled under the cover of night, and even carried a pistol, not just for protection and security, but to ensure that no one from her own group would abandon the mission, risking capturing and betrayal. Though her willingness to issue such threats has been debated, historians agree it likely saved countless lives. Tubman's impact extended far beyond the Underground Railroad, as during the Civil War she served in the Union Army as a nurse, cook, spy, and scout. Her intelligence gathering missions behind the Confederate lines were critical to the military status of the Union. In 1863, she helped coordinate a Combahee River raid as a daring military operation in South Carolina that liberated 700 enslaved people. Working along the Union Colonel James Montgomery, Tubman guided gunboats through dangerous mineral-filled waters and her deep knowledge of regions, rivers, and swamps. Her leadership during the raid marked the first time a woman in U.S. history has officially commanded a military expedition. Her wartime contributions challenged social norms of race and gender. While many abolitionists celebrated her military role, some feared public backlash and worried that stories of armed black liberation might provoke violent reputation from the Confederate sympathizers. Tubman, however, was undetermined, believing freedom was worth the fight. Despite her groundbreaking service, Tubman struggled for years to receive military recognition or financial compensation. She was repeatedly denied a veteran's pension, reflecting the racial and gender inequalities of her time. Nevertheless, Tubman's legacy as a fearless liberator, wartime hero, and advocate for equal endures symbolizes the relentless fight for everyone and the freedom in American history. Despite being celebrated as a hero and freedom fighter, Harriet Tubman faced many personal struggles throughout her life. After the Civil War, she lived in poverty, and though she risked her life working for the Union Army, she only reached a small widow's pension after her second husband, Nelson Davis, a Union soldier, passed away. This unfair treatment showed the racism and sexism of the time, even towards some as famous as Tubman. Her personal life was also full of heartache. Her first husband, Tubman, a free black man, chose not to join her when she escaped from slavery in 1849. As she rescued him, and she found herself that he has remarried and is still heartbroken. Tubman could not have children, likely due to the severe head injury she suffered from a young girl. However, she created a family in other ways by adopting a girl named Gentry and caring for other relatives and other freed people. Harriet Tubman's legacy is more than just a story of escaping slavery. It's a narrative about justice, resistance, and courage. In the 21st century, her life resonates with modern movements for racial equality, gender justice, and human rights advocacy. She stands as a reminder that systematic change often requires an uncomfortable amount of radical actions. Tubman has stated, "I have reasoned this out in my mind. One of two ways that have to do right in my life, liberty or death. If I could have not one, I would have to do the other." Tubman's recognition through 2 national parks and the proposed $20 bill had an enduring presence in her cultural memories. However, remembering Tubman is not about honoring the past. It's about continuing to fight for her, for what she stood for, justice, equality, and liberation today.
The Walden household was in an uproar. Mom was getting ready for a big party. Delivery men bustled in and out, and Conrad and Sally were bickering again. Mom went to run some errands and left Miss Kwan to babysit. "You two behave," Mom said.
Oh, wait, hold up. This isn't no English file at the kindergarten level.
That's my book, Mr. O'Connell.
It's a history. History 1. How about you start reading that?
Yes, sir. Today we will be using John Brown Abolitionist by David S. Reynolds. John Brown was born May 9, 1800 in Torrington, Connecticut. He was the fourth of 8 children, and his father was Owen Brown, and his mother was Ruth Mills. At 5 years old, John and his family moved to northern Ohio, where it would eventually be known as an anti-slavery state. Owen Brown, John Brown's father, ended up being John Superman growing up and being the seed layer for John Brown's support for abolishing slavery. In 1812, John Brown was sent on cattle drive to Michigan. While there, he stayed with a man who owned slaves. One of the slaves, who was fairly young, was keen to John's eyes. While there, John witnessed the slave owner abuse this little boy. He would strike the boy over the head with an iron shovel, simply due to his skin color and to show how dominant white people were over any other skin color. Everything that John witnessed while there went completely against the beliefs John had known, those being justice, equality, and the belief that slavery was a moral wrong. At the age of 16, John Brown lost his mother, Ruth Mills Brown, due to possible illness or health complications. After John Brown's failed education attempt in Plainfield, Massachusetts, he met his first wife in Hudson, Ohio, Diane Lusk, in the late 1810s, and ended up marrying her in 1820. During their marriage, John and his wife had 7 kids. However, only 4 lived: Frederick Brown, John Brown Jr., Owen Brown, and Sarah Brown. In 1832, after the birth of their 7th child, Diane's health began to fade away, and she soon passed away, leaving John as a widower and to look after their children. Following the death of Diane Lusk, he married Mary Ann Day when she was 17. John and Mary had 13 children together, with a few passing away at an early age: Sarah, Charles, Peter, Austin, Amelia, Ellen, and an infant son. John Brown Jr. helped keep records of his father's business proceedings, and was the only one to serve in the Civil War. Owen, Watson, and Oliver helped in John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Annie helped at the Kennedy farm for the raid on Harper's Ferry. Salmon Brown was part of Bleeding Kansas and the Battle of Black Jack.
Pennsylvania Avenue. Looks like you owe me $1,100.
Sure can't. I'm only $15.
Well, looks like I win. And you lost, just like John Brown. If you ever did the project I told you to do about him.
No, Mr. O'Connell, I did. On the Panic of 1837, John Brown lost a ginormous amount of savings, leading to him filing for bankruptcy in 1842, losing almost everything they owned at the time. The Harper's Ferry raid consisted of Brown and his army of 21 men, who were 16 white men, 3 free black men, 1 freed slave, and 1 fugitive slave, with 2 of his kids, Watson and Oliver Brown, who were a part of it. On October 16th, Brown and his army went from the Potomac River into Harper's Ferry, capturing men like Colonel Lewis Washington, who was a descendant of President George Washington. On October 17th, the local militia of the town learned about Brown's appearance and trapped them in what was nicknamed John Brown's Fort. On October 18th, U.S. Marines and Colonel Robert E. Lee crushed the revolt. Lee and the Marines stormed John Brown's fort and killed most of his men, including his sons Watson and Oliver, while Brown was kept alive and ended up being imprisoned. John Brown's trial began on October 27, 1859, only 9 days after the Harper's Ferry raid occurred. There, Brown was interrogated and questioned. Brown stayed true to his beliefs about racial equality and continued to emphasize his moral commitment to end slavery. During his trial, many abolitionists wrote and spoke on the trial. Charles H. Langston stated, "To speak of myself, I have no political prospects, and therefore no political fears. For my black face and curly hair doom me in this land of equality to political damnation, and that beyond the possibility of redemption, I have a neck as dear to me as Smith's, Hale's, or Giddings, and therefore I must like them publish a card of denial. So here it is, but what shall I deny? I cannot deny that I feel the very deepest sympathy with the immoral John Brown and his heroic and daring efforts to free the slaves." Page 489, John Brown's Abolitionists. On November 2, 1859, John Brown was found guilty on charges of treason, murder, and inciting rebellion. He was sentenced to death and was hung on December 2, 1859. Brown was hung in front of a large crowd filled up by pro-slavery sympathizers, militia, and journalists. Abolitionists in the North mourned his death, while Southerners celebrated his execution, celebrating the death of a man they believed was a criminal.
Harriet Tubman and John Brown are historically connected through their shared commitment to the abolition of slavery. Tubman, as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, directly led enslaved people to freedom through her heroicness and unyielding bravery. John Brown, a radical abolitionist, believed in armed insurrection and a means to dismantle the institution of slavery, leading to his ill-fated raid on the Harper's Ferry.
Their connection lies in their mutual dedication to action over words and their willingness to risk their lives for the cause. Tubman supported Brown's raid by helping him recruit men and providing guidance on strategy. She shared his belief that slavery was an intolerable moral evil that required immediate and decisive action. Together, Tubman and Brown symbolized the diverse strategies employed in the struggle against slavery, one grounded in secretive and strategic rescue missions, the other militant confrontation. Their legacy reminds us of the profound sacrifices made by those who fought for justice and equality in the face of unimaginable opposition.